So, welcome everybody to our fourth episode now of what we dubbed the Prime Barrel Chronicles, where we talk to people behind the whiskey in hopes of, understanding the entire grain to glass process, bringing you more info about the people that are behind the whiskey you all drink and love, and really like show you the laborious process that goes into making a great tasting whiskey. And with that being said, I'm joined today by Andrew Jerdonek. Correct me if I mispronounced your name.
Nailed it.
Awesome. This is actually second interview with the Starlight folks. First one being with Christian, and I'll link a video in the description below. But today we're really talking the man behind their famous now whiskey program, single barrel program, I should say. Now, a lot of people don't realize, or maybe they do, but maybe not outside of your immediate state, is that you guys have not just a single barrel program. You actually have a plethora of regular SKUs, as we call it in the biz, right? Sure. So let's start there. Let's start talking about what your portfolio looks like. How did you end up at Starlight, and your role at Starlight?
Yeah, sure. So let's like you said, let's start with talking about the other SKUs. So it's really easy to get lost into the world of single barrels, because that's where we're at. Everybody, that's the hot new trend, and I love it. That's my role. But it's really important as a farm, a winery, and a distillery to touch on the other products that really help pave the way for the single barrel program. So I'd be remiss to say that we did not, cover brandy, because brandy is what jump-started Starlight Distillery. I mean, the Hubers as a whole, as a company, as a family, come from a traditional German heritage background of brandy and wine drinkers. So of course, being the largest fruit farm in the state of Indiana, apple producer and grape producer in the state of Indiana, that helps dual amazing with our brandy portfolio. And we start with just our basic grape brandy Starlight that runs, I believe, $19.99 a bottle, and it's blended on average of 7 years. So even out the gate, you're looking at a 7-year product. Then you take it up to the Starlight Reserve grape brandy. That one is usually around about a 10-year blend on there, and those are all grapes that are pulled from our farm. You start going into Applejack brandy, which is aged like a new age state whiskey in charred American oak for 4 years. Then you also do a estate grown apple brandy as well, that's aged in a French cask, that's anywhere from about 8 to 10 years as well. And then also I gotta just throw a plug out for it. We actually just put out not too long ago our first 10-year single barrel bottle and bond apple brandy, and it is outstanding. One of the, in my opinion, it's all relative, but in my opinion, top 5 thing we've ever produced. So brandies are a huge reason why it paved the way for us. Then from 01 to about 12, we were exclusively doing those brandies and ports. Then we took off with grain-based programs in Indiana. So we were able to start doing grain-based distillation. So that took off Carl T, our 12-barrel blend of whiskeys of 3 and 4 grains. That really helped, jumpstart the whiskey program. Old Rickhouse Rye, which was rye originally aging in the original Rickhouse that we had. That's anywhere from about a 10 to 16 barrel blend. Then you have our gins. Our gins are very unique because we have 2 different styles and offerings. We have our standard gin, and then we also have our barrel aged gin. And what's cool about that is that we do a very unique thing where we do a gin soak. So we take our corn-based distillate, and then we soak botanicals for anywhere from about 24 to 72 hours in there. So we're talking juniper, cardamom, coriander, high citrus fruit peels, peppercorn, star anise, things like that. And for those who don't know about gin is not like bourbon. So we know bourbon has to be aged not aged, but it has to have at least 51% corn in it. A lot of people assume that since juniper is the thing that makes gin, that it has to be at least 51% juniper, and that's not true. It just has to be a vast majority of it. So you can have 2% juniper, but you better make damn sure that everything else is less than in there. So we have that, and then we have the exact same thing in barrel fermented or a barrel aged version of it. So if really what I tell people, if that piney juniper is what does it in for you with gin, try the barrel aged one, because it kind of dumbs down that pininess and brings up an oak profile. And let's see, what am I missing? We also have the crowd favorite, which is blackberry whiskey. Which actually was a complete accident. It was an intern a couple years ago accidentally pumped blackberry concentrate into a whiskey vat, And it then took away from the fact that it was no longer bourbon whiskey, is now in the flavor category, but it birthed this thing that was an absolute tremendous accident. So it's one
Are
of
they
the
getting
things.
royalties from sales of that product now or no?
You know, that's a little bit above my pay grade, but I'm sure that there was a slap on the wrist and then an add to the paycheck. So it worked out very well. So we have all these, and then you can't forget about the vodka as well. And where we kind of shine with the vodka, and we've won best vodka in the past for it, is that it's a 7-time distilled on our vodka column. Very, very crisp, very, very clean, 100% heirloom corn that's grown here on the farm, gluten free. It's something that really attracts a lot of people over there. So single barrels are amazing. Single barrels are the thing that gets me out of bed in the morning. Absolutely love it. But you know, our core lineup that has been there the entire way is what will always be. So I always say that if you want fun, funky, and unique, single barrels are there. But if you want that consistent pour, you cannot beat our core.
And you know what? Normally, the blueprint for, let's just say craft distilleries. Not that I'm calling you that, but for craft distilleries, the blueprint really is, get a source juice while their own distillate is aging, right?
Yep.
Then get that out in the market and then expand their portfolio. And so they're at the mercy in the beginning years of their ability to source good tasting whiskey. And then when they make the switch, a lot of times I don't want to call it they don't make sacrifices necessarily, but the quality kind of jumps a little bit, right, in the negative direction. You guys are in a completely different position where you have other streams of revenue. You're not just reliant on whiskey. And to your point, it's a farm. It's the biggest farm in Indiana, so there is revenue streams going there. You guys also produce wine. So whiskey, you have a benefit, I guess, on sitting on stuff as long as you need to make sure the quality is top notch, and that's exactly what you were. Quick anecdote: our first experience with you guys happened completely by accident. So as a club, we don't always just pick our own barrels. We help other clubs procure barrels as well. And your distillery was recommended to us by the guys from Breaking Bourbon. So the Breaking Bourbon is one of the leading bourbon blogs out there. And so they're like, have you looked into these guys? I'm like, I haven't even heard of them. And this is 2 years ago. And they're like, well, you better. So we looked into it, and they're like, why don't you source the barrel for us, and then we'll release it to the members of our club, which is exactly what happened. And next summer, we went and visited you in person. And on that trip, this was the first trip we made to Kentucky, completely off schedule. We didn't have any appointments set up. We quickly realized that's not the way to do it. But having said all that, we've tasted for a lot of craft bourbons on that trip, young 2-year bourbons in Kentucky. And to us, Kentucky was the Mecca at the time. Kentucky was the magic word until we got to Starlight. I think on that trip, the best tasting bourbon we tasted on the Dine and Try trip was actually at your distillery. And I'm not just, blowing smoke up your nose. It was actually what got us into it. And if you recall, we selected not one, but 2 barrels. Then we did the exact same thing just a couple of months ago.
It's for better or worse, it's the curse of Starlight. Come in for one, God knows what you leave with.
Leave with many. And hey, I am. It's for us, honestly, it's all about the taste. When we even pick the barrels, and like the people that are familiar with the club, they'll vouch for it. We taste everything blind, and so the barrels that we pick are explicitly merited on the taste and nothing else. Like I don't want to know what I'm tasting until I selected the barrel, and then you tell me. So with that being said, like we selected a honey finished barrel with you last time. And the one that completely blew me away was the rye.
That sleeper rye.
Oh my God. First of all, for people that don't know, you have, and I find it hard to believe that people that don't know, but you have plethora of finishes available. And I'll get to that in a second. But mostly you use 53-gallon barrels, right? For the most part. That thing was a butt. And I'm not talking about Sir Mix-a-Lot. I'm talking about the size of the barrel, right? And it's for people that don't know, look it up. It's a huge, huge barrel. what,
Yeah, it's
four
just
times
under
the size?
103. Yeah, just under 133 gallons, 700 liters. Mhm.
Yes. And so that barrel had actually an interesting story. I don't recall if you do you recall that story? I think it was like it went through many different hands. At some point, belonged to Jack Daniels. I think it was. Or
You
was it the
know
other one?
that is probably no. I think what you're thinking of that one might have been the rum one that came
Okay.
through. The what the Hogshead one was is that one was an accident, really, for
Okay.
lack of better terms, which happens a lot of times. So you know, when you get these barrels, okay, it's awesome to be able to get them in. But what a lot of times people in their mindset don't think all the way through is that you get these 700-liter casks, which is awesome, but you got to be able to fill them up. So it's, that is, inside there in itself, you're looking at almost 3 standard barrels worth inside of one.
Yep.
So I think the way that it ended up happening is that we were acquiring, because we had just started acquiring Portuguese port barrels, because we only wanted to use our own in-house ones that went through our whole program of the winery. And so we decided that we were kind of, boxing ourselves in a corner, only doing our own thing. So let's, mess with traditional Portuguese ports. And we started acquiring barrels. And I think that Christian, because Christian's the one that sources all of our barrels, he's the one that gets his hands on it, grades and evaluates. And I think that on paper, it was a really good idea. And it was, and it turned out phenomenal. But when they show up, I mean, these things are massive. These
Yeah.
things are absolutely massive. It was kind of one of those things that was, did we order the right thing? And if we did we make a mistake? And we did
Holy
not.
crap!
We
Yeah.
did.
What do I do with it now?
Holy crap. Yeah, what are we doing? Because we didn't just order one, we ordered 2 to start, and then we ended up getting another 4 that were in PX form and things like that. So it was a little bit of an uh-oh moment, but it completely resolved itself. So yes, we ended up getting the Ruby Hogshead butt, and we also got a Tawny.
Which is what? Which is I think ours was Ruby, if I recall correctly.
Yours was the Ruby. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so for the people that obviously nobody tried it yet, we're actually launching it in a couple of days. All the other Starlight barrels that we ever had sold out completely, so this is timely.
Beauty.
Yeah. What killed us? Well, not killed us, but what like sold us on this barrel? We weren't planning on selecting a rye at all. But once you add Starlight, you can't help but try as many as you want, and you were very, great, hospitable in terms of letting us try stuff. There were a lot of us. When we got to that one, it's a port finished rye, and you would think it would, taste sweet. It wasn't that at all. Like when you drink it, it has a complete traditional rye profile, very tasty one at that.
Yeah.
But then when the finish kicks in, that's when the port kicks in, and it's like, oh, holy shit! You start to pick up chocolate notes, cocoa notes. It's like dessert in the glass. And we couldn't say no. Like my guys looked at me and they're like, "Can we pick 2?" I'm like, "Yeah." and so that's what happened. So I'm super excited for the launch of that. I can't wait for the people to get the bottle in their hands and kind of experience that for themselves. To kind of tie in the loose end on your core SKUs real quick, because we kind of jumped the gun a little bit. But your core SKUs, they're not available throughout the nation, right? I know you guys expanding distribution. They weren't available in New York, where we are based out of, but they are going to be very soon, as I understand.
Yes, I believe that the way that we're headed, I believe that we're going to be able to put core SKUs inside of New York. Our compliance coordinator, Nick Finn, is working really, really well and really hard to be able to kind of hash out those things, because it's one of the things where you have to be pick and choosy a little bit, because since we are blowing up very quickly, there's a lot of demand knocking on the door. And so we kind of have to figure out, where is our product going to be best suited in order to get our name out there. And we believe New York is one that is it's kind of a no-brainer. It's publicity. It's the mecca of everything in the United States, basically. So
the way you guys did it, actually, like I commend you on that, because the barrels were clearly available in New York prior to your entire portfolio being available. And so people got excited for that. I know besides our own club, there are a number of others based in New York that have picked
Yep.
up your barrels in the past, and they were all successful with them. So I can't wait until the actual core SKUs, come into the shop, and then we'll
Yep.
see what we can do with them in person. Cool. Let's go back to the beginnings. Like, how did you end up at Huber, and
Yeah.
specifically, how did you end up being the director of this wonderful program?
It's been a very fast and a very wild ride, and I've loved every second of it. But basically, the way that it worked is that to take it all the way back, me and Christian and Blake all went to high school together. And as a matter of fact, we went to the same high school that Ted went to as well.
Okay.
And just to tie it even more, Nick, our compliance coordinator, he was my doubles partner in tennis in high school. We all went to school together. So we are staggered 2 years apart. So I'm the oldest. 2 years under me is Christian. 2 years under Christian is Blake. So I was exiting as Blake was entering. Then I went up to Indianapolis, Indiana, where I went to college, and Christian actually went there for a very small amount of time before he ended up going up to Niagara College, where he got his viticulture and enology degree up there and spent his tenure up there. And so I got my degree in Indianapolis. My, at that point, fiance moved up, and we spent a year up there. She's a homebody, convinced me to move back home in Southern Indiana. So we came back down here where we inevitably got married. And I ended up working for a logistics company, because actually my background is event management. In Indianapolis, I ran two very successful event venues down there, and events just really aren't my thing. Something about dealing with brides yelling at you on a Saturday night, just it's not really for me. And I don't even really know how I got into that. So I ended up working with a logistics company in Louisville, and I'll tell you this. I can take one thing away from the logistics company, and it's that it taught me what I do not like. It taught me what I do not like, and it taught me my value. That is just a place that I just I didn't feel ethically and morally we aligned. I just felt like it was very cutthroat. It was kind of like get a person on the phone, and if they don't buy, they die kind of mentality. It wasn't for me. So I quit that job, and I was in the process of trying to find something that aligned with my degree, which in Indianapolis is easy to do. Southern Indiana is not. And one night, actually at the probably expense of a few good pours, not Starlight yet, I ended up blindly putting in a resume to Huber's to be essentially a floor guy, which the floor guys are responsible for stocking the wine and taking inventory. So you're kind of a more glorified stock boy. But I'll tell you this, that the floor guys at Huber's are the hardest working people ever. They get the shit end of the stick a lot of times because everybody relies on them. So they're the hardest working people. But when I started there, the barrel program was brand new. So they had kind of had a barrel program in 2018 and started the barrel program in 19 when I started. And I really showed and expressed interest in so much more than just where I was. So it's something that I really enjoy bourbon, and I love whiskey, and I love what it can all do. But where I really kind of get involved and I get excited is from the very beginning, the seed you put in the ground, the work it takes to grow it, the continuous harvest, getting that grain and then being able to mash it, mill it, ferment it, turn it into a distillate, and then put it into a bottle, and then being able to send that corn that I saw in the field last year into a bottle that's being sent to New York. Like it's crazy. Like where did we ever go? How did we ever get to this point? So basically I expressed my interest in so much more than just drinking whiskey. And that allowed me to take off. And at one point, it was around 2020 is when I really got involved. And I was basically working two full-time jobs. I was working as I can't remember if I was a shift lead or a manager, or I can't remember what I was, but I was doing that while also doing the barrel program for them. And I was happy to do it. Anywhere that I could put my value that they felt I would do it. I'd work 3 full-time jobs for them. And it took off. And basically in 2019, before I was there, we sold 30 single barrels. I helped get on in 2020 and we sold 214 single barrels. We had a meeting and we said that's too many for us. We need to back it off. And I did exactly the opposite of that. And in 2021, I sold just north of 400, which is just under 700 selections. You being part of those.
Yeah.
And the goal is to we're going to be realistic, and the goal is to hit right around that number this year. So throughout my time there, I started as a part-time floor guy, promoted to full-time floor guy, promoted to shift lead, promoted to floor manager, then promoted to the spirits program director, where I'm at now. So I went from part-time stock boy to director. And it's been a fun ride. It's been amazing. So now my full-time focus is on great groups, great retailers coming in that want to acquire good whiskey, potentially get good SKUs into their store. I work hand in hand with Nick, our compliance coordinator, James Wood, which I'm sure that you've met before, our products, brands, and sales manager. So the three of us answer to Dana Huber, who is really in charge of all of distribution over there. And we're just trying to rock and roll, trying to get as much good product as we possibly can.
Yeah, I've met the entire crew, and I mean, you couldn't collect a better, people to work on the same team. So that's awesome. James actually runs your Starlight branded channel in our Discord server. So that's
very cool.
That's awesome,
Nice.
and people are engaging with him. And actually, there was a question there that people asked me to ask you, which is, how do you guys go about selecting finishes? I think I know part of the answer, but a lot of them, it almost feels like there is a lucky timing component for the reason I already described, that you don't really have to release things, when they come of age. But you guys definitely are a front leaders, I should say, in the finishing category. I think you started it. So just about. So how do you go about going from more traditional finishes to something completely insane like Brazilian oak, or
So it's funny because we started obviously producing single barrel bourbons and single barrel rye. And one thing that we've always said is that where we are in the finishing world, which again, it's out of control in a great way. But you can't, there's this stigma, at least before us, that if you only people finish whiskey if they make shit whiskey. There's kind of that mantra. And we're setting out to prove that to be wrong, because the thing is, you could strip our whiskey completely down to its core and find that it is an outstanding product. So we believe that a great finish starts with an amazing, great base bourbon or base rye. So that was our start. So we don't do anything until we have mastered the craft and then remastered it in our mind. So basically, we wanted to start making those great single barrel bourbons. And then, funny enough, how it started was, I believe Christian tells a story about how he had to spend time convincing his dad, Ted, our current owner, take a chance. Let me get these two Olorosa casks, because we still had port. And we had kind of dabbled in the port world before, but really, not really. And so he's like, let me get these Olorosa casks. Let me get them. And Ted kept saying, no, they're from Spain. It's expensive. It's like, why would we buy it? And finally, after I'm sure about the billionth time, he convinced them, and he brought him in and brought these two Olorosa casks in. They filled them up and aged them. I'm not for sure what the age on them was, but it probably was in the realm of about 3 to 8 months in there for the heat cycle. And it was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. And then they started running with Olorosa, making bottle and bonds, making different blends, toying away from the single barrel aspect and more into the blended to try to make more. So as soon as we had that success, we started churning and burning more in. And we started it with 90 proof, moving it up to a bottle and bond, and then moving it up to inevitably where it's at now at cask strength. And we saw that green light kind of go off. And from that green light, the wheels start turning. And so, Olorosa is amazing in a cherry, but we produce all these things. Why don't we double down on our own product? That's where apple brandy came from. A lot of our earlier runs were actually in Applejack brandy casks, but they just weren't notated as such. So now, next thing you start seeing is Applejack brandy finishes.
Yeah.
Then you start kicking open the door into more ports, and you start seeing all these different variations of our own Huber, Rubies, and Tawnies. And at that point, because when I first started in 2019 is when the Olarosa import game were kind of dabbling, and we started seeing a little bit of Applejack. In 2020, towards the tail end of 2019, beginning of 2020, the doors were just kicked open. And that's where all the super, super fun things started coming in. So you start see us importing in, Sauterne casks, Calvados casks, traditional apple brandy casks, more Olarosa, PXs,
Peach brandy.
Peach brandy, which actually, funny enough, that peach brandy is from us as well. So that's a 10-year peach brandy. So we start doing that, and now it's gotten to the point where the sky's the limit. As long as we're getting quality casks from quality houses and quality distilleries, I mean, really, the sky's the limit for us. And eventually there might be a bell curve with it. It might be harder to get casks, or it might be more expensive. The supply chain of the world isn't exactly in tip top shape right now. So it's one of those things that, that is how we really kicked open the door. It really was just the owner's son, Christian, he knew in his head it was right. He knew that this was it. This is something big. Let's capitalize on it. And that's really what kicked open the door. So it's they always say imitation is the greatest form of flattery. And whenever we see other craft distilleries all of a sudden putting out these other things, it's not insulting. It's not copycat. It's, they had to have seen or heard through the grapevine that this had good success, and they might want to try a hand at it as well. So I think that is absolutely phenomenal when we see those things. But, I think that we're somewhere around, and I could be off by this because we do have so many, but I think we're around 36 SKUs for finishing right now. And, some of those were one-off barrels. Some of them were hundreds of barrels, but there are, Starlight has had fun and continues to have fun in the finishing program.
What you said about the base bourbon, I couldn't be stressed enough, because when we came there for the first time, I've done my due diligence, and so I knew that you guys specializing on finished bourbons, but not being exposed to it all that much prior to that visit, I had that stigma about, is it infused? Am I
Sure.
going to overpower the bourbon? Like, what is exactly that I'm going to be tasting? And those two first barrels, we actually started with the base 4-grain bourbon that you guys have.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually learned something about myself. I tend to gravitate towards 4-grain bourbon. I think that the wheat in it does something for me, for my palate. And so that thing was awesome. And we've gotten rave reviews about your base bourbon. The second barrel, I think, if I don't recall correctly, I think it was bourbon port finished.
I think you did do a pour bourbon, yeah.
Yeah, and it was my partner who loved it. And again, like, we knew that barrel is going to arrive around Christmas time, so that's perfect, right? It's more of a colder climate bourbon, if you will. But I want to stress that enough, because it all starts with a great tasting whiskey, and your finishes, for the people that haven't tried Starlight, they don't overpower the whiskey. The whiskey is still very much there. You're drinking whiskey. You're not drinking juice. You're not drinking brandy. You're not drinking Calvados. You're drinking bourbon or whiskey. It just has this unique character that is truly and uniquely Starlight. Now, as far as all of these questions that popped into my head, first of all, how long do you guys age your stuff? Does it depend on several factors? Like, what's the criteria?
So what we like to do is, we always tell people we're palate tasters. So I can give you a general time frame, but that is not etched in stone. So we tell people that we like to operate on typically a 3 to 8 month age. And really what that actually is it's not a month to month basis. It's actually a heat cycle basis.
Right.
So for example, if we barrel something in November and we barrel the same thing again in March, they're probably going to exit at the same time, even though one's like an 8 month and the other one's a 3 month, because they're both entering the heat cycle at the same time. So by doing that, we like to base it around 3 to 8 months. Now, with that being said, sometimes things slip through the cracks. So we have found some Olarosa that have kind of gotten pushed back a little bit. that has aged for 12 to 15 months. We're starting to see a lot of barrels that we've held back that have aged for over a year. And so really what we do is we deem it when it's ready. So when it's ready, groups and retailers can come in and they taste it. Then we do not bottle it until we have gone out and put the stamp of approval, until the boys, Ted, Christian, and Blake, sometimes if I'm lucky enough, I get to do the stamp of approval, but the boys, they are the ones that seal it. And when that's ready to go, we pull it. Now, here's the thing is, if let's say this, because as you know, for finishing, we sell them by the half barrel. Let's say we sold a half and the other half isn't sold yet. If we go out and taste that and see like, shit, this barrel is ready, but we don't have the other half sold, we'll bring it inside and slow that process down, because we think that is the best that barrel is going to be. And we don't want to do any disjustice by overaging it. So at that point, we'll taste it on people on the inside. And that way it's a little bit slowed. So it's a lot easier to decipher, what you're tasting is what's going in the bottle. And a lot of times, if it's a good barrel, which usually they are, sorry, my cat just jumped up on here, we'll just take the other half on there and just keep it easy. So, as long as it can go through one heat cycle and sometimes two, that's where we kind of go. And that's where we typically see the 3 to 8 month threshold.
That makes total sense. Next question. In terms of finishes, it's my understanding that the single barrel can be reused a couple of times for finishing purposes, right? So first fill, second fill, third fill. Like, how many fills do you go? And I'm sure there's a difference in tasting profiles between those fills. Or have you found that to be the case?
Yeah, so one of the things that we do is you're correct, and really neutrality of a barrel is subjected to the distiller. And what we have found is really about 3 times is when we have maximized life on there. For us as Starlight Distillery, we think 3 times is really, really enough. And so typically what we see is we operate again with 7 different cooperages in the United States domestically, which is also a little bit larger than most people do. We operate from the biggest of the big to the smallest of the small. We honor the craft people always. But what we find is that we use the unused new aged American oak barrels to do our bourbon. Then from the bourbon, we kick it to our rye program. So it ages the rye. Then from that point on, it could either do another round of rye, or it could end up going to the wine program. One of our top selling seasonal wines is Pop's Reserve, which is a Concord blend aged in an X whiskey barrel. That is a big thing that's been happening there. But also something that's been new on the horizon, for us at least, is we are getting quite a bit of influx in breweries coming to us. Everybody loves a good bourbon aged stout, bourbon aged beer. And so our barrels at that point are good, because you have the sweet simplicity of bourbon dueled with the nice bodied rye spice of the rye whiskey. And now you've kind of shaved off a little bit of both. So when you age some type of hop based alcohol in there, it's not overpowering. It's complementary to the product. So really what we do is we like to give 1 good shot at bourbon, potentially 2 good shots of rye. And when we're done with that barrel, although we don't mind selling them to people to turn them into flower pots or what, we still want to keep it into the alcohol program. So we're very willing to work with other wineries, other breweries, hell, even other distilleries if they really want to. So we try to keep that alive as much. And especially, like, for example, when we're done using like your rye port cask, that is not going to be sold to, Billy Joe down the street so they can saw it in half and put flowers in there. That is 100% going to be kicked back to some other alcohol producer, because that is too quality of a barrel to let it just go to firewood or whatever. We want to make sure that somebody's aging port, wine, spirits, or beer on the inside, or whatever you want to age in there.
They'll be getting a winner. They'll be getting a winner. I
100%.
I know I don't normally rave about our own selections, but this one is going to be, as the kids say, fire.
Yeah.
Anyway, what was the first finish ever that you guys produced? Do you remember?
So the first finish we ever did was a port finish.
Okay,
as a matter of fact, hold on one second because I have it. Hold on one second. This is the first guy.
Oh my God!
So,
look at the label.
Yep, it's an old guy. So this is port barrel finish Carl T. Bourbon whiskey finished in a port barrel sitting at 102 proof.
Wow.
So yeah, this is an old guy. I'm trying to see if there's, because this was before this was being basically kicked out as I was coming in. So I was looking at it, and quite frankly, I didn't even know what port was when I started. So I was like, port, like, does that mean like import, export? I had no idea what I was talking about. So yeah, that was the very, very first one that was ever done. And I was actually fortunate enough to get my hands on one of these from a fellow coworker a couple weeks ago. And so that one, that was kind of an experimental one where we just kind of aged through really quick just to see what it was like. And it turned out good. If I remember correctly, it's a little hot. And also what's funny to me, at least, is 102 is such a random proof. It's such a random proof because we either were below the 100 belt or we were up at cask strength or at bottle and bond. We weren't. I'm sorry if you hear my baby crying in the background. She just woke up.
It's totally fine.
Yeah, it's just a random proof. So it's interesting to see how far we've come from this basically over to this, which is just an absolute 180. It's one for the era.
Yeah. Speaking about progress, so I know you guys do obviously rye and bourbons and other spirits, but have you ever done, or do you have plans on doing like a single malt or Armagnac or something like that?
It's funny that you mention it. So we actually do have a single malt program. It is not up and running yet, though. So we are kind of waiting for a higher age statement on there because we feel like our bourbons are absolutely great at 4 and 5 right now, and growing. Same with our rye whiskey, but right now we're in the 4 to 5 threshold, and it's getting much better. But we feel like with the malt, it is very good, but we think that it's going to be better. We think that really, we're at about the 6 mark, but we want to be more like 8. So we think that where we're at now is phenomenal. But like I said, anything we do, we want to master our craft and then remaster it. And we really think the projections of an 8-year are going to be a little bit better than the 6-year right now. So we have it to be determined on when we actually bring any out, but that will be probably within the next couple of seasons that you'll probably start seeing malt enter the market. As far as Armagnac goes, we are importing in Armagnac casks for finishing. We don't necessarily have a plan to do Armagnac yet. We kind of have an Armagnac style of distillation with brandy to a degree. Jason, our head winemaker, master distiller, on that side, he would be able to touch on it, but we kind of have, because it's kind of the argument of which one do you find better, Armagnac or cognac? Do you like the single distillation? Do you like the double distillation? So we kind of toy with Armagnac style distillation, but for right now, we're sticking to our American style of brandy because we think that's where we really hit home with it. Although the Armagnac market is one that is banging on the door as well.
So again, I'm going to speak as a single barrel curator and and a retailer. We always, as a club, we always want to do something interesting and unique and something that has not been done before, not just for the sake of just doing something different, but to expand people's palates. Like, it gets really tiring to do bourbon rye. So we've kicked the tires on single malts, and I come into whiskey through Scotch. Actually, my first love was Scotch, not bourbon. I still to this day consider Dalmore 15-year-old Scotch one of the best Scotches for me. But for some reason, like, we just couldn't never get a traction in terms of barrel yields. Like, it's one thing to sell a few cases here and there, but it's completely different to invest money into a barrel and then to be able to move it, because as a business, any business within this industry, like, you don't want to freeze up the funds and then not being able to do anything else until that sells. That being said, we've done a tequila selection. We've done almost done a Scotch, but when like when I finally got enough interest in it, the producer with which we were about to select a barrel told me that it was a butt, and I'm like, oh,
That's a lot.
I'm like,
That's a lot.
sorry, can't do.
See
Yeah.
if you can do the
Anyway,
Starlight and see if you can just take a fourth of it.
exactly. But I'm super excited for you to for your program, future program. Next time I'm there, I'll definitely ask you to taste whatever you guys have.
Yeah.
The American single malt is a growing category, and it has its fans, it has its detractors, right? People
Mhm.
sometimes don't put American and single malt in the same sentence. And I think it's a shame because I could name you at least three different producers that make outstanding American malts. And for the people to like, for the people that try, another anecdote, real quick on the topic. We went on another single barrel expedition just 2 weeks ago, and one of the stops was actually suggested by a member, and that stop was Old Line Distillery. Now, for people that don't know who Old Line is, and not many people do, it's a small, I think it's Virginia-based distillery. They do single malts, American single malts, and nothing but single malts. My first question to them was, "Are you gluttons for punishment? Like, how do you make money? Because it's
Yeah, I was
not."
gonna say.
They do very well with it, and all of the guys, except for one who suggested it, have never tried American single malt, and actually were kind of like, I don't know if that's my kind of thing. But did everything blind. Again, they loved two barrels, and we ended up picking two half barrels with Old Line.
Oh, yeah.
So it's definitely a growing category. I guess is the point that I'm trying to make. And for the people that are trying to find something else to try and or impress their whiskey drinking friends, it's certainly something someone needs to look into.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
to finish off the whole finishing conversation, is there anything else that we can look forward to in terms of crazy finishes? And I know you have like what 36 SKUs you said.
Yeah,
I don't know how much more crazy you can get, but hey, you never know.
yeah. I cannot directly say specifically, but I will tell you that there are casks sitting at port right now that have traveled a great distance across certain continents and will be crossing ponds shortly.
Alrighty.
Now the question is I mean, that could be to us in a week, that could be to us in a year. It's,
Yeah.
it is what it is. But just when, of course, just when you think, Starlight is maxed out on potential, more
No.
SKUs come. So
Yeah.
there are going to be quite a few more that are going to be potentially 1, 2, 4 off barrels that are going to be very, very special and that are going to be very rare to try to get your hands on.
Let me throw a curveball at you. Most
Sure.
people would ask you, "What's your favorite part of the job?" I think I already know the answer to that.
Yeah.
What's your least favorite part of the job? Oh, let me rephrase that. What is your least favorite part of dealing with people like me who come in and try to, egg you in giving them something that they might not deserve,
Yeah.
or they sometimes don't even know what the hell they want, right?
Yeah.
So,
I would say that first is you don't know until you know. So
right,
I do the same exact thing because quite frankly, if there's a product that and there's a product that you like, you got to go for it because wouldn't it be terrible to be driving on the way home and to get a call from a guy like me and say, I can't believe you didn't want X, Y, and Z. And you're like, are you kidding me? So
right.
no, I totally get it. And I really don't think that this is going to sound as cliche as absolute possible, but I don't think that I have a negative or a least favorite part of it because at the end of the day, I get to wake up, I get to come into work with a phenomenal family owned people that are not just friends, but they're family to me. I get to meet people from all across the United States and for lately across the world. I get to sip whiskey and I get to talk about a brand in a variety of whiskey that I'm passionate about. And I get to share these pours and hear people's stories and hear, where do they come from? What do you like? What do you dislike? And at the end of the day, I get to make sure that this whiskey that I love and a brand that I absolutely adore is going to end up on your doorstep. I still think that my absolute worst day is still light years ahead of other people's. It's one of the things that I think that even if I have the hardest day, I still leave work with a smile because there's not much to be upset about. So,
And I think you can consider yourself a very lucky individual if that is truly the case. A little sideways, and this is by no means is meant to be an inspirational video of any sort, but I can tell you this much from personal experience. If you find a vocation that doesn't really feel like work, and you can make it pay your bills, stick with it, because you're going to be
yeah,
great at it, and eventually it'll reward you beyond your wildest dreams. And this is the case with me. I've spent 25 years in corporate world, and I've gotten pretty far with it. I mean, I've worked, at some point, I always knew that I wanted to do something on my own, and this was always a passion. This was always a hobby, and at some point hobby turned into a business, and then business turned into something that could support my family. And
sure.
I don't really feel like I'm working most of the time. I feel like
Yeah,
this is just something that I do. And let it be a lesson to youngins who are listening,
yeah,
and trying to figure out what it is to do. Another lesson, and something you said in the very beginning: if you're working for someone, and you're showing an initiative, not because you want to get paid more, obviously all of us do, but
yeah,
because you are truly, truly invested and interested in learning everything that there is to know about that business, that employer, and I'm talking as an employer right now, will always recognize it, because it's always, if you make my life easier and free up my time to do something more, valuable or strategic, I'll always value that. And so, like,
yep.
this is super important. And I'm not surprised that you've gotten to your point, to where you are now, in relatively short, period, um, uh, through showcasing all of those qualities. So kudos to you.
Well, thank you.
I'll
I
get you.
appreciate that.
I'll get you out on this. Again, we're doing this to kind of let people meet you, and showcase people behind the brand. What gets you going outside of whiskey? What are your hobbies? How do you like to decompress? Now that you have a baby, that might be a completely different answer.
Yeah,
Sleep probably would be one, but
yeah,
but
no,
outside of
absolutely.
that,
You can ask my wife. I'm a walking ball of ADHD. I cannot sit still. I always have to be moving. I have to be going. If I'm not at work trying to sell whiskey, I'm probably talking about it, or I'm probably drinking it, or I'm probably doing it. But outside of whiskey, I'm 100%, adapt to being with people. I love talking with people. I do like my personal time, but anytime I can spend with friends and family, especially now that I have a family of my own that's growing, anytime I can get out, we can go do something, whether it's just driving around, just going, I'll tell you, and you can ask anybody, that I'm not the most athletic person, but I love doing things like that. Anything like that. It's fun to get out, but I will say that a majority of my things, again, for better or worse, are bourbon centric. So I will tell you that, and some people love them, some people hate them. I am a bourbon hunter. So if I'm not doing Starlight, there's a good chance, if I'm not on baby duty, that I'm hopping in the car and I'm going and seeing what I can hunt down for an hour or two. So I'm remiss to say that bourbon is a great, great factor in my life. It's got me moving, it's got me going, it pays my bills, and I've met 1,000 tremendous people along the way.
that's awesome. Favorite movie and favorite band, real quick.
Favorite movie, favorite band. Okay, I have a tie for three. Okay, three
All
movies.
right.
I am a huge Jurassic Park guy,
Okay.
just the original. I'm a big
Classic.
Titanic guy. Another classic. I know, it is what it is. I love Titanic, and then Jaws. Me and my wife are obsessed with those three movies. I honest to God could just watch those three on repeat, over and over again. And then as far as my favorite band, that is a very good one. I'm a really big country guy.
Okay.
I'm in Southern Indiana. People down here, they either absolutely love it or they absolutely hate it. I'm a real big fan of the oldies, but I'm also a
All
big
right.
fan of a lot of the new guys coming up there, as long as it's actually country and not whatever is happening right now. Yeah, I would say one of the best concerts I ever went to was Garth Brooks with my wife, and I would have to say probably Garth Brooks is my guy.
One of the best concerts I ever went to, interestingly enough, it was Prince. It was
Mm,
amazing show.
yeah.
I was dragged into the concert by my then girlfriend. And I loved every second of it. And ever since, like, the live musical events are always a thing for me. Obviously now it's a little tougher. I mean, things are opening up now, but
Sure.
yeah, I mean, I'm glad to hear it again. Like, I think a lot of people would agree with the Jurassic Park. I think a lot of people would
Yeah.
agree with Jaws. Titanic was the first movie as a guy I actually shed a tear. Same girlfriend dragged me into that one.
It's a
So
great, yeah, you can thank her for that.
yeah,
That's a one yeah, there was one of my girlfriends at the time made me sit through and watch it, and I agreed because I don't know why, but what she failed to mention was that it was like a, I don't know, a 9-hour movie. It's funny, she was dead asleep and I'm sitting there like bundled up, like I need to know what happens. Like I think I got a couple man cards stripped away that day, but I've never looked back. So
tell you what, Jack could have fit on that door. You
I'm
can't tell me
telling you,
otherwise.
to the end of it. And you know what? Leo won't speak on it either. Greatest controversy in movie history.
That's true. All right. On that note, I'll let you go. I have you have a newborn baby, so I'll let you get back to her. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining
Absolutely.
me today. Well, I'm sure we'll be making a trek to you guys quite soon. So I'm looking forward to that. Thanks again.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you for having me, and I'll look forward to seeing you guys.
Cheers, man.
Cheers. Have a good one.